All right, welcome back to another deep dive review. This is a deep dive review of Man in the High Castle, Season 4, Episode 5. I know I've been away for a while, but we'll cover that possibly in another video. I decided that going forward with these episodes, I'm going to break them up into pieces because the deep dives were getting a little bit too long. Maybe not necessarily too long. They were getting difficult to edit. So I'm going to break these up going forward into at least 2 parts, possibly even 3. So yeah, let's just jump right into this. So this episode opens up with a flashback to the end of World War II. Their soldiers, they are pulling, it's at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. There's soldiers pulling down the American flag and they're hoisting the Nazi flag. And there's it's kind of a somber feeling around the whole thing because obviously they're sad that they lost, not just sad, I would think that they lost, that we lost the war, but just they don't know what's gonna happen next. Then we cut to John, Whitcroft, and Daniel. They are sitting in the barracks. Helen's there too, along with baby Thomas. They're sitting in, I'm thinking it's the barracks, and they're listening to the Voice of the Reich, which is clearly the propaganda radio now. So, and the radio is talking about how people are thankful that services are being restored and that food's being delivered and all these things. We don't really know how much truth there is to that. We can look at it from our own point of view, from a historical point of view. Americans rationed so that our troops would have a lot of food or would have plenty of food. There's no, as far as I know, there's no evidence that Americans were lacking what they needed. Is it possible that they were lacking in this alternate universe? It is possible. It's possible that we didn't ration at home, so that the soldiers didn't have what they needed, and maybe the Nazi soldiers did have more. There's really no way to know. That's the problem with propaganda, is that you don't know truth from fiction. So there's always that. It could be true, but there's just no way to know. So I think it's or I think it's John actually that says to turn it off. One of them says to turn off the radio. Then I think there's a knock at the door, and Colonel Bolden shows up, and this is where the reality of what's happening at least hits John. John answers the door and sees, the first thing he sees is the armband on Colonel Bolden, and he stops dead in his tracks. And I believe Colonel Bolden even asks him if he's going to invite him in, and John just quickly nods and lets him in. And then as the colonel just is taking food out of the bag, or has put it down, can't remember exactly what, but we see Daniel looking at the armband. The camera focus shifts to Daniel's face. He's looking at the armband. Now we don't really know why it's focused on Daniel right now, but it is. And then what happens is they take the food out, and he tells them that they have a choice, which is to join the Nazis. Those who join the Nazis will be given positions of power, and those who don't will be killed. So he leaves 5 armbands on the table, and then he leaves the food, and they immediately, actually not really immediately, Daniel doesn't know what to do, because here's basically the enemy at this point giving him food, and he's probably thinking, what I'd be thinking is, well, wait, if I take the food from the enemy, then I'm kind of acknowledging that it's okay to accept the enemy for this purpose, and he doesn't really want to do that. John tells Helen to go ahead and start giving some food to Thomas. There's some milk. They warm that up. But after the colonel leaves, Whitcroft basically says, well, we can do this, but we don't have to believe in it. Which I think that's foolish. That's what you say. That's probably what you say in the moment, because maybe you're thinking that there won't be any real duties that I'll have to do that'll fall in line with their with their beliefs. And that's what he's thinking, that he can do this without having to actually exercise any of the things that the Nazis are already doing. Daniel wants to fight. Daniel tells them we should, Eisenhower's bringing together a militia. We should go find Eisenhower and fight. John just basically cuts all that off and reminds them of the bomb that they saw, the power that had, and he he basically says whatever they have works and what we have doesn't. Now this is clearly in stark contrast to Alt John. Alt John, we don't find that out yet. We find that out later in the episode, so we'll get to that when we get there. But he pretty much has accepted. This John has pretty much accepted that fascism works, and freedom and liberty don't, since it was defeated. Then Daniel asks, I think, probably the most important question. What happens to me in under this regime? And when he says this, he pulls out the Star of David that he's wearing, and John, in my opinion, foolishly says, "I don't know." John does know, and you can see on Daniel's face he's kind of devastated by that answer. I think that was kind of a cop out from John. John does know that Daniel has no place in the Reich. He will be killed. It doesn't matter if he accepts it or not. So in the next scene, they're wrapping up some food. Daniel's head is slunk over. He doesn't know what he's gonna do. They tell him to just go as far as he can. Daniel's standing outside, and he says to John, I remember when we would have died for each other, and now here you're telling me to just go. He's like, where am I supposed to go? And they just tell him, just go as far as you can. And this scene closes with John and Helen sitting at the table, and John's looking at the armbands, and Helen says, this is what's right. It's what's best for us. And she's right to an extent. It's right for right now. But again, they're expecting that they can just put on the armband, they'll play along, and this won't have any effect on their lives. They have no idea how it's going to affect their future. Okay, so credits roll at this point, and when we come back, we see John walking down. Basically, the episode continues where the previous one left off. We see John walking through the tunnel, coming out the mine on the other side, finding the car, finding the map inside the car, and heading into town. Okay, then we come back to the other universe, and we see Belle in the BCR hideout. She's cooking in the kitchen. She's listening to Got My Mojo Working by Etta James. Now, Elijah enters the scene at the phrase, till I don't know what to do. And I think the symbolism here is that Elijah isn't interested in eating right now. He's more interested in who's arrived. And who has arrived? It's Equiano Hampton, the leader of the BCR. So after some quick introductions, Belle invites them to eat, and they're seen sitting around the table discussing the upcoming negotiations. And Belle asks Hampton if he thinks that they will accept their terms. Equiano responds and says that this is the first time in America or the JPS or the Reich where a black man is negotiating on equal terms with someone else. He's being treated as an equal, and he tells them, even if they don't agree to our terms, this is a huge step forward. He also tells them about how when he first picked up one of these automatic rifles, how he felt a sense of power by picking it up. But he also has been looking forward to the day when he can put it back down. And I think he's hoping that day comes sooner rather than later. We then cut back to the alt universe with John. He's sitting in the car. He's outside Alt John's home, and he's just kind of sitting in the car. Helen walks up, and she's wondering what he's doing because he's supposed to be in Greensboro. John plays it off as though he's trying to surprise her, tells her that he decided Greensboro could wait till Monday. She leans in and gives him a kiss, and you can tell that John hasn't felt affection, real affection from his wife in a long time, because he responds to the kiss, and Helen's kind of like, oh, I know why you're here. So they walk into the house, and Helen goes to put the food away. John's just kind of checking the place out, seeing how this alternate life of his turned out. Helen comes back into the room, takes his briefcase away, gives him another kiss. John can barely contain himself at this point. And Helen looks at him a little bit confused too, because she goes to lead him into the bedroom, and he doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't know how to react to this, because again, he hasn't felt anything like this in a long time. So afterwards, John, sorry, yeah. Afterwards, Helen notices that his hair is gray, has a few gray hairs, and that he got a haircut. So this, I think, is our first indication that someone in the alternate universe is noticing the differences between their John and this John. It's very minor, but she does notice it. She then goes to make John some breakfast, and he ends up enjoying a good breakfast. Interesting thing about this scene, Sweet Dream Baby is playing in the background. So it's almost as if this is a dream come true for John. He has a loving wife, his son's still alive, and he has a nice house. He has a nice house in a middle-class neighborhood. It's obviously not as nice as the house he has as a Reichsmarshal, but it's still a very well-to-do life for this alternate John, or that this alternate John had. So like I said, it's a dream come true for him at this point. John's then reading the morning paper. He comes across an article about local Army reservists being called up for service in Vietnam. That'll become important shortly. While he's reading the paper, Alt Thomas walks in, just kind of nonchalantly walks in the house, goes to the fridge. John looks like he has seen a ghost. He's in shock for a few moments. He's just staring before he gets up, and he walks over to the fridge, where Thomas is, and he embraces Thomas. This is the embrace of a father who has not seen his son in a very long time, and he just kind of holds on to him. Thomas doesn't know what to do, so he awkwardly returns the hug. And then John just kind of, again, just like everything that kind of has been happening, he just kind of plays it off as though he just wants to make sure he gets a good look at Thomas, because Thomas is growing, and wow, it's just he's getting so big. So that's the end of part 1 in my deep dive analysis. I plan on leaving a full analysis of the episode until I finish all the parts that I'm doing. So that'll come at the end. So thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you get notified of future videos. And we'll see you in the next one.